My name is Dr. Anthony Chong, and I'm from the Malaysian Sign Language and Deaf Studies Association. I'll just share a little bit about my background. I'm born deaf to, I will talk about the deaf leadership, specifically focusing on the SDG goals, on gender equality, quality of education, and partnerships for the goals. A little bit background about myself. I'm born deaf to hearing parents, and my education started. These are my experiences. The various types of the education goals. I was in a special education school, special ed in the primary level. Then when I moved to my mainstream or high school, it was with the hearing people, hearing students, and with no interpreter support. I am a deaf activist for the last 20 years, focusing on the deaf community because of some of the lack of facilities, the live. I am an educator, facilitator, speaker, and also researcher. In the social media, I have, there are a lot of members who sign up, and there are a lot of support to be given. There are about 1,000 over that I keep in touch with the various deaf community from all over Malaysia. And all deaf people are actually in the various parts of Malaysia, so not to just one place. So to have an event, it's where we bring together all these deaf people. 2 years ago, when COVID started, with the impact, deaf people stayed at home. They were not able to go out, not able to get information. They were with their, and of course, there is a limit to the communication with their family members. So one platform was the social media platform where we exchange information, exchange news. And that's where deaf people pick up the information and so forth, because as you know, some information are not viable in sign language. I like to focus on some of the deaf youth issues or associations in the country. There are about 11 deaf youth associations around Malaysia, but I think it is like too many. We only have 34,000 deaf people registered with the Department of Social Welfare. And deaf people are of various degree of hearing loss, and there are very, very few youth who are coming together, and the age range are like, you know, such a wide gap. And each of the states do have their youth organization. They have members, like only about 30 members in each. And the Registrar of Youth, ROY, required the committee they require 15 of the members to be in a committee. That means it's like if each organization only have 30, so half of the organization must be in the committee. And there is a gender inequality in most of this association, as it's being dominated by males rather than females. And the school achievement or the education level is very low. So most of them like only complete their PMR or even SPM. And so there is a certain inequality or for our deaf youth. And not many of our deaf youth place priority or not essential in joining a youth organization. Before that, when there's no IT, technology advancement and so forth, many deaf youths come together in a number of deaf association, like, the membership tends to be about 1,000 members and so forth. But because of the advancement of technology with the use of smartphone, video calls, WhatsApp, so a number of youth has gone into the IT world to communicate, to contact, rather than in physical. With the smartphone, the IT, number of deaf people are more independent compared to being dependent previously. I see that there is 4 things that our deaf youth are sincerely lacking. One is a passion and understanding of having a sense of belonging in deaf association. There is a lack of education and training, because in this education and training, it will help the deaf people in supporting the association and in supporting the deaf community. And although there are a number of youth programs being advertised, being put up, our deaf youth lack the opportunity to participate in such program because if they were to join in some of the youth programs, they have to pay additional cost of getting sign language interpreters, as these programs are not accessible to deaf people who depend on sign language, as they're all mostly being in spoken language. So that's another challenge for our deaf people. Yeah, our deaf people do know how to read and write, but not as fluent. But in a 2-hour program, if the deaf keep writing and asking someone to help them write, it doesn't make sense. And this is certainly not everyone's cup of coffee to just read or just write in any programs. And you also notice that some of our youth or deaf people lack in their skills and also have weak leadership because there's no mentor or support. Previously, when the youth join in such programs, we have a physical leadership training to build confidence, building up self-esteem, and also improving ourselves. But now we don't see that many leadership programs that's being carried out. And so most of the deaf communities are left with the senior deaf people or veterans deaf people in any of these organizations. As I mentioned about the skills and weak leaderships, and I feel that there are 7 key areas that's sort of missing for engagement. Deaf people growing up has been much oppressed, like the parents, the teachers always having the negative word like, oh, you can't do this, oh, you're deaf, you're not able to complete this or not be successful. So deaf people have grown to be more passive rather than assertive. So one of the areas, of course, is communication, negotiation, But for deaf people, that's always being submissive. They don't know or not, they don't have the skills of negotiation, of argumentation. And so again, whether it's right or wrong, they lack these skills compared to, you know, having to say no to their elderly parents or even to the older deaf generation. So how can we support deaf people in being independent and self-reliant? Commitment. I think some deaf people understand the term commitment, but some may not. You will see, for example, one deaf person say, you know, you take that person to be in this committee, or you take another one in that committee. So that person may be involved in so many areas. And so they attend meeting and, you know, just look and not being able to contribute. The literacy level, as I mentioned again, is quite low because in most of our primary and secondary education, the system does not actually match us. And always deaf falling behind in their education. And in the economic sense, deaf people are actually below the poverty due to their educational level. They do not get jobs in the managerial level, or nor do they get a higher salary. So most of them are in the workforce level, like, you know, crews or technical. And again, being deaf can be expensive. The hearing aid that we buy to use for our daily usage, at least it's about 2,000 ringgit and more for one hearing aid. And we have 2 years, so you need 2 hearing aids. And that is to match or to help us in our daily life, to listen to sounds and to survive. And sometimes the lack of confidence and the expectations, like, you know, can I do it? Can I be of help? Is not that. So sometimes an invitation to observe, to see whether it fits, would be helpful. And a number of deaf people are still lacking in the rights of themselves, and because of the non-acceptance of the community, sometimes at large. When we talk about capacity building, if you want the young deaf people, the youth, to be skillful in deaf, but each of these deaf youth have their own leadership association and having guidance. They are not able to work on their own. Now, we did mention that we have 11 deaf organizations. A number of these associations have lacked in youth participation and even youth activities because they lack of experiences, and also reason being our deaf leaders' guidance are not there. So a number of them have to independently find their ways and to develop their skills. And they must, and it's necessary that, you know, they take up this role to run the association. And you do not see many of our young people talking in terms of politics and what's happening in the country, and also about issues that surround them. So they are not actually involved in much politics and the future of the Deaf Association. And again, there's no sense of belonging or need for them to be in their deaf associations. And a number of course, deaf, the hearing people think about self, think about the future of their community, about the environment issues, climate change, supporting. But I guess it's not with our deaf youth. You see a number, how many deaf organizations carry out such activities. And in terms of empowerment, there should be at least some deaf participation in the hearing-led working team. So if you want equality or you want inclusiveness, try to include at least one deaf person into your hearing-led working team. Previously, there was, like in Parliament, there was this group of young people, not young, sorry, I forgot, this group, and they want to do programs for the deaf people. They want. So they did contact one or two deaf people to be involved in this group. But unfortunately, the one or two deaf people who have been contacted to join just ignore the request. And so this group went about their activities with no participation from either an OKU or the deaf person. So, you know, how do we want to include having a person with disabilities inside this group? So at least try to include some of our deaf youth in this hearing-led working team, and so allow this deaf youth to learn from these experiences. So it does not matter if it's an OKU-led or a hearing, just all hearing and all that. Try to include deaf people into these programs.
Pardon, my deepest apology, Doctor. However, we're running out of time. I hope you can summarize your point before we move
Sure.
forward.
This is the last. This is the last slide.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, this is my last slide, and it's on recommendation for our deaf youth. Like, you know, we talk about there are a number of barriers for participation of youth. So let's break the barriers. We want to urge the government collaboration, with any youth working teams to encourage full participation in any government-led activities or programs, urging the government or ROI to endorse one national association, which is the Malaysian Deaf Youth Association, for better effectiveness and leadership. And because there are a number of allocation of budget and no budget for deaf youth to focus on training and learning programs, and to encourage deaf youth association to collaborate with other associations for in fact with the hearing association, where we can learn from them for exposure and experience. That's my presentation, and I want to thank you on behalf of also my BIM.